It all began when I moved into my new apartment, a charming place in an old building with a lot of character. I was excited about my fresh start, the cozy atmosphere, and the quirky little details that made the place unique. Little did I know, those same details would soon become a source of terror. The first few nights were uneventful. I settled in, unpacked my boxes, and began to feel at home. But then, things started to change. It began with small, almost imperceptible incidents. I would wake up to find objects slightly moved from their original positions. A book that I distinctly remembered placing on the coffee table would end up on the shelf, or my keys would vanish from the kitchen counter, only to reappear in my bedroom. I chalked it up to exhaustion and the stress of moving. But then, one night, as I was lying in bed, I heard a faint whispering sound. It was so soft that I thought it was just the wind. But as the nights passed, the whispers grew louder and more distinct. They seemed to be coming from the walls, an unintelligible murmuring that sent chills down my spine. Determined to figure out what was going on, I decided to investigate. I checked every nook and cranny of my apartment, looking for any logical explanation. But everything seemed normal. The windows were closed, the doors locked, and there was no sign of any intruders. One night, as I was lying in bed, I felt an icy chill wash over me. I opened my eyes and saw a shadowy figure standing at the foot of my bed. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the apparition, too terrified to move. It was a tall, dark silhouette with no discernible features, just an ominous presence that filled the room with dread. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure began to move closer, and I felt a cold, clammy hand touch my ankle. At that moment, I snapped out of my paralysis and bolted upright, fumbling for the light switch. As soon as the room was flooded with light, the figure vanished, leaving me gasping for breath and drenched in sweat. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I decided to do some research about the building. I discovered that it had a dark history. Decades ago, it was a boarding house, and a series of mysterious disappearances had occurred. Tenants would vanish without a trace, leaving their belongings behind. The authorities were baffled, and the cases remained unsolved. Desperate for answers, I reached out to a local historian who had written about the building's history. He told me about a man named Arthur, who was rumored to have been involved in occult practices. Arthur had lived in my apartment and was suspected to be behind the disappearances. But before the police could question him, he too vanished, leaving only a cryptic journal behind. The historian showed me a copy of the journal, filled with disturbing drawings and writings about summoning spirits and opening portals to other realms. My blood ran cold as I realized I might be dealing with something far more sinister than a simple haunting. Determined to put an end to the terror, I sought the help of a paranormal investigator. He arrived with a team and a plethora of equipment, ready to confront whatever was lurking in my apartment. They set up cameras, audio recorders, and motion sensors, and we waited for nightfall. As darkness descended, the whispers began again, this time louder and more aggressive. The temperature in the room plummeted, and the shadowy figure reappeared. The investigators sprang into action, trying to communicate with the entity and capture evidence of its presence. Suddenly, the figure lunged at one of the investigators, knocking him to the ground. Chaos erupted as equipment malfunctioned, lights flickered, and an unearthly howl filled the air. In the midst of the chaos, I saw a swirling vortex open up in the corner of the room, just as described in Arthur's journal. The figure was sucked into the vortex, and with a deafening roar, it closed, leaving the room eerily silent. The investigators and I stared at each other in shock, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The air felt lighter, and the oppressive atmosphere had lifted. The team reviewed the footage and found clear evidence of the entity's presence and the vortex. They published their findings, and my apartment became a well-known case in the paranormal community. Though I was relieved that the nightmare seemed to be over, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed within me. Even now, I sometimes hear faint whispers in the dead of night, and I wonder if the unseen visitor is truly gone.